pleasure to be joined by a distinguished panel of guests. I think we have a powerful panel here, so I'll sort of not do too many introductions, etc. I also see that we have only 30 minutes. I thought that we had an hour. We'll try and see what we can do about it, but ideally speaking, I think we should have a little more of a broader discussion and a longer discussion. And my distinguished panelists agree. So we'll see what we can do. And it's gone down to 24 minutes, so I don't really know what's happening, but we'll see what needs to be done because we'll have to sort of take into. Please do change the time. Thank you. Thank you. So I'll start off with something very simple and straightforward, saying that what does net zero really mean as far as boardroom conversations is concerned? And I'll start with Ashwini, if I may. And Ashwini, where the context that I would like to bring to the table is that JSW Foundation, we know the kind of work JSW Foundation does for sports, etc., right? But from a point of view of net zero, considering that it's a steel company and there's a lot happening on green steel, etc., so on and so forth, what does net zero conversation really look like at the boardroom level?
Thank you, Swami. I think, one good advantage of being with a group like JSW is that there is a lot of congruence. Is it better?
Yeah.
So, I think one good thing about the group that I represent here is that it's a lot of congruence. I mean, when I was listening to you and when I was listening to the other discussions happening before our panel began, one element that came to my mind was very significant when you're talking about ESG is the congruence between all the three components. And the congruence between what you do within the organization and outside the organization as well. And so therefore at JSW, the discussions about how, carbon emissions can be reduced has been into discussion for quite some time. And I think the public, in the public domain, there are all those news, where issuing of green bonds, committing about $1 billion for reducing the carbon emissions. As I understand, we are already below the national average of carbon emissions in terms of steel production. We still want to further reduce it by more than 42% in the next 5 to 6 years. So very clearly, knowing that we need to contribute to the country's agenda of bringing down the carbon emissions. Now, when you're talking about net zero, I mean, the kind of interactions that I've been privy to at the CSR committees, one advantage that JSW brings on for itself is that it's a conglomerate. So there's a whole lot of circular economy opportunities which we have been tapping right from day one. So just to give an example, the slag coming out of the steel plant is used for making cement. JSW Cement was the first slag-based cement company in the country. The flue gases that emanate are used for producing more energy out of it. There is zero liquid discharge from the steel plants, and despite all of that, there is still a lot of I would say heavy work going on. We are partnering with IIT Mumbai. We are partnering with a number of international institutions. BCG is working closely with us on that. There are patented technologies to bring onto the table to how further reduce the carbon emissions in steel sector. And the focus is that how do we keep on greening the steel, to turn it into low carbon steel. That's one. And then moving on to, it cannot be ever net zero. It cannot be ever zero carbon because carbon as an alloy would always be required for making steel. But can we bring down the carbon dioxide emissions by looking at technologies? That's one part. The congruence part that I wanted to touch upon is that we as a foundation then also work very closely with the steel company or the energy company. JSW Energy today is one of the biggest producers of green energy in a sense. It's into hydroelectric and it's getting big way into solar. And these are all connected in a sense. Cement and steel and energy, these are all interconnected themes for us. And to manage the footprint outside in congruence with the corporate strategy or the blueprint that we have, we are doing a whole lot of work. I think Bhaumik is there. He's sitting. The number of discussions that we've had with Bhaumik on, looking at solid waste management across the country in a big way to make sure that how plastic can be co-processed not just in our cement kilns, but also in our steel electric arc furnaces. And so that brings down carbon emissions. I mean, our carbon, the coal requirements go down by at least 30% as a potential. So that's a big saving. Hydrogen, as and when it would be available, is going to make a big change, but it's a long-run process. And I think important thing is a whole lot of investments and incentives are going to be required to bring that ecosystem in place. So a whole lot of work as a foundation. We see how we can work on waste management. It can be connected to co-processing opportunities. Can we manage a water footprint in a better way? So with a very solid data-driven approach using the expertise of various technical institutions, water footprint is being managed inside the plant as well as outside the plant, inside the localities. So I think the idea that I wanted to just leave behind is congruence between what you do as a business, what you discuss at the board level, to bring down your costs and bring down your emissions, vis-a-vis how it is connected to the larger amount of things that you do in the ecosystem.
Correct. So just to give some context to what Ashwini was saying is, concrete is the second most used commodity on earth after water. And when he talks about slag being used for cement, it also reduces the carbon footprint of concrete, because the key carbon footprint for concrete comes from the use of cement. So if you reduce the use of cement or use green cement through green steel, I think it's the value chain process. That's just the context. Navdeep, I sort of go to you. And the key takeaway from Ashwini that I pick up is that ESG is not just some disclosure compliance, but it's also an opportunity. So from an opportunity perspective, what are the kind of conversations that take place at your boardroom?
Sure, I'll speak there. Is it working? Sorry, because I doubt my skill of holding a mic and speaking. So I would like to speak here. Sorry for that. Interestingly, the agenda says it's net zero and boardrooms. So let me start with the boardroom. And we all know that the boardrooms are actually black boxes. Nobody knows what happens in the boardrooms till the time a crisis happens and the boardroom reacts very, very fast and manage or mitigate that particular crisis or risk that happened. But before that, what all has been happening in the boardrooms is not known. It remains in the black box. So that's something, a perspective which we should know when we are talking about net zero and what happens at the boardroom level conversation. So that's one part of it. Net zero is a very interesting kind of a call out. I would call it, it's a race to net zero. It's not just net zero. There is a race now to net zero, and boardroom and those black boxes are actually running that race. And then keeping everybody in the organization and the stakeholders around run for that race, which is net zero. Let me kind of decouple the net zero in three different dimensions of the net zero. The first dimension is whether we can stop something which is adding to a risk. For example, coal. Coal has been called out last year in COP26 as an area that should be phased out by 2050. Indian government said no, we will not phase out, we will phase down by 2070. Well, here is an interesting example. Diageo India, we have phased out. We have phased out coal last year, 2022. We do not have a single ounce of coal burnt in Diageo India's direct operations in our distillation processes. What did we do? We changed the technology of our boilers to have an energy mix of biofuel. We were skeptic whether we will get that much biofuel, but interestingly, India always kind of meets the challenge that comes in the market. The ecosystem started working, helping us, having abundance of biofuel available. Our management took a decision to blacklist or block all the coal suppliers in our vendor management system, in our SAP system. We do not have a single coal supplier in our system. So the decision is, if you don't have a biofuel, the factory will not run. So that's something which is the black box decision, the boardroom decision on net zero on coal. So that's on what you can reduce or what you can stop using. That's one example on the net zero. The second example on the net zero is what we can make circular. Okay, so that's basically, I'll give two examples on that. One is on plastic waste. I mean, we have a mandate by the ministry to collect and recycle 30% and then 40%, then 50% under extended producer responsibility, EPR. So during COVID times, we couldn't do our bit on the EPR part, but we do have an inventory of about 20 to 21,000 metric ton of plastic that is basically post-consumption plastic in the market. We clubbed all of them, and I'm happy to announce Diageo India has collected back 100% of our plastic waste in the market by last July 2022. We have another target to achieve 22,000 for our F22. We are on it. We've got 3 suppliers who are working on it. So that's what our black box, our boardroom is talking about. That's on the circularity part. On water, another initiative which was taken is we have a major, obviously water is a component as an ingredient in our products, but we also have other processes, like for example, before we bottle our products, we have a washing and sanitizing process for that. We made a technology change and a process change. We actually reuse water 9 times for our bottle cleaning processes, which has reduced almost 15% of fresh water intake from the groundwater. And you know, that itself makes a huge difference in a geography which is called out as a water stress geography. For example, in Alwar, I would like to quote that example is, so Alwar, we've been working there from last 4 to 5 years on catchment-based source sustainability on water. Happy to announce in this forum that our Alwar distillery is certified the first ever distillery of India and the first ever distillery of Asia to be certified against the Alliance for Water Stewardship standard, which is a global standard on AWS. And that's the first distillery of Asia, which is a source sustainability catchment-based standard, very, very rigorous standard. It actually takes into account what the villagers think about you. It takes into account about what the government thinks about you, what is the regulator's view on you, on your water usage, etc. All of that is taken care of. So that's basically the second dimension of what my boardroom is looking at on the net zero. And the third one is basically replenish and regenerate. So we've reduced it, we made it recycle, reuse, now replenish and regenerate. So on replenish, obviously, we can't replenish everything inside our plants, so we have to step out, work with the local communities. We've got a footprint of about 1 million cubic meter of water to be replenished. We are almost there, I think about almost 600,000 cubic meter of water is already being replenished in the communities through different projects, check dams, watersheds, rainwater harvesting structures, desilting of ponds, etc. Now, that is giving us a cumulative replenishment every year with the rainfall, and we are actually capturing all the data. It's actually validated by a third party based in Germany called First Climate. So we have a pre-validation and a post-validation of all the work which we do. So that's on the replenishment part. But I think there's another story of regeneration. So we started working on one of our very important supply chain. We use broken rice for our distillation processes. And we know that no farmer produces broken rice. I mean, they produce the rice. So, and we can't trace rice because obviously the value chains are very complex. Food Corporation of India procures it from the farmers, stores it for 5 years as part of our Food Security Act, waste some part of it, and that waste part basically comes to our value chain. So we have started working, TNC, our partner is here, Manoj is sitting over there. So we've started working on the rice landscape transformation project. That's on the regenerative agriculture where there are practices to save water, have soil content, carbon content maintained over there, sequestration projects, etc. And also work on the water part of it, saving water out of it. So my boardroom is looking at net zero from reducing it, reusing, recycling it, replenishing and regenerating it. Thank you.
Thanks, Navdeep. I think these are excellent examples and fantastic examples. And just to sort of give a context, extended producer responsibility comes from Sweden, and essentially what it means is that if Navdeep is producing a bottle of beer, choose your poison, non-alcoholic, alcoholic, mine's non-alcoholic, then, even he's responsible. He as the company is responsible even for the bottle top. So that's the extended producer responsibility. I wanted to sort of, I'll give the last word to Prerana because she's the smartest amongst all of us. So I'll give the last word to Prerana. But what I'll like to do is go over to this side of the table. So it's easy to understand, say, ESG from a product perspective. So there is steel, and then you can see a combination of slag being used for cement. You already see water being used, reused 9 times, so on and so forth. So it's easy to see a product. Now we're going towards IT services, which is slightly vague, right? I start with maybe Pratyush. LTI, you are a software services company. What does ESG look like in your boardroom? Because what are you dealing with? Sorry.
No. I'm just trying to make a different perspective to before I answer your questions. I'll go back to my same word, as I said, greenwashing. I'll take 2 minutes there before answering your question. So in India, it is rampant. You go to any the manufacturing sector, say thermal, steel, cement, all manufacturing sector, their JG emission pretty high, but they will talk on water. We are 10 times water positive, 5 times water positive. Kind of greenwashing. They will never talk of GHG emission for their ton of cement produce or any other gigahertz of energy produce and all. So people will say, wow. Second, you go to all plastic producing companies. I don't call them don't want to utter those words also. We all eat like on the name of beverages and all. So do they produce beverages or do they produce plastic bottles? As our moderator says, as EPR, the same company in the name of COKE or whatever, if they are in Europe, if they are producing 1 lakh bottles every day, they are giving details of 1 lakh bottle, how they have zeroed down to the government. But the same companies, being a MNC, is not doing in India. They're not doing. And again, they will say, we are water positive because I've taken water in India and I have settled down somewhere in Dubai or Pakistan, somewhere I've, conserved 5 times. So I'm water positive. That's what kind of greenwashing going on. Second, coming to my own sector, IT and all those things, there's a myth going on in India. If you print out a paper, it's detrimental to the environment. But be aware, each of your mail, SMS, WhatsApp do have a carbon footprint. So unnecessary making marking copy to 1,000 people, it doesn't take time. People used to do. And at times, if your mails are pretty small, it's better to take a small printout than marking copy to 12 people. So just bringing that prospect, I thought kind of greenwashing is there, and it's everyone's job as a citizen of India to watch closely how the greenwashing is going on in India. The more you understand greenwashing, you are an expert on ESG and sustainability, I'm telling you. It's other way around and correct. Coming back to the IT sector, boardroom and all, we are trying to bring out, again, a product which are green on IT itself. Like LTI has already committed net zero emissions, carbon neutrality by 2030. Water neutrality by 2030, which is hardly any time left in our hand. And then already committed all parameters to SBTi. If you haven't taken this word, Science-Based Target Initiative, those who are trying to be on this sector, please read about SBTi. Just talk to Google Baba. SBTi is a process where you commit your all scope 1, 2, 3 detailing, submit to them. They raise 1,000 question queries, how do you coming down and all. And then they confirm that yes, your roadmap is right. Yet, in the previous session, Swami was saying it is yet evolving, especially for scope 3. As an IT company, scope 3 is pretty, what you call complex to measure. The moment I'm started talking to some of my vendors, those who provides me, suppose 200 buses every day, sir, वो तो नहीं पूछते, आप क्यों पूछते हो? And there is no level playing across. So what will happen? The moment you start, in the name of health safety, start checking all their tires, so that your life of your employees are safe, they will give you a less priority. They'll go to your competitors and work for them because nobody is checking. It's not level playing. So that's what we all are facing. The moment you go as per global standards, you are the least chosen player in the market. That's what in totality happening. Coming back to the boardroom talks, I had the opportunity to had 32 rounds of board meeting as on today through my career. Some of the question, I'll not name which company and all, but let me take out the exact questions. The moment you talk of energy efficiency equipments, people think, yeah, you are increasing our capex. It's a cost to company. The moment you say, top notch, it's better to travel on this sector with this flight because GHG emission is lesser there. They think that you are taking away their basic rights of travel on those classes with respect to specific Airbuses, which is extremely double, almost kind of 1.52 times of higher emission than the regular flights. So people don't perceive those things very nicely. And then also I learned over the years, and each time I go now to the board with a new proposals, say in cement, thermal sector, the energy requirement is pretty high around the clock. Correct. And say cement, 1400 degree minimum temperature is required. And there are almost 20% of your energy is wasted out in the process. If you plow back that, automatically your coal consumption reduction will automatically happen. It takes care automatically. So there is a process called WHRS, Waste Heat Recovery System. It costing roughly, those days, I know 10 years, 5 years down the line, like 150 crores. The moment you put into your cement plant, the buyback roadmap I prepared was 2 years. Board approves, get it. But by the time it got implemented, 9 months was the buyback. Post 9 months, it was all savings and directly falling down to the bottom line of the P&L. People could see. Next board meeting, they said we need to get it done across all plants in next 10 years' time. By investing 150 crores. This what happens. So my experience with boardroom is, don't go to boardroom by saying this is the additional expenditure. You go to the board by saying, if you achieve this, this is what the ESG benefit. Say our rating goes up, investment comes closer to us, and overall we see as a benevolent company with ESG parameter, yet I'm bringing this amount to the bottom line in 5 years' time. Correct. So that meticulous exercise has to be done before reaching out to board. Probably I'll stop there. A lot of time is going out of hand.
No. I think, Pratyush, this is very interesting. Just to give you a context before I go over to Abhishek, is that in cement, 1400 degree centigrade is used for clinker production, which is essentially how the limestone is heated. And typically, the heat that is being provided is provided by burning fossil fuel. So that's also embedded into the clinker as a whole in terms of the carbon overall, right? So I think he's raised a very important point in terms of, I think Ashwini was mentioning about green hydrogen and so on and so forth. So having your fuel source or your energy source also becoming absolutely clean is critical for reducing, for LTI to reduce its carbon. So before I go, I'll go over to Abhishek and I'll sort of give a different spin to it or look at it from a different dimension. You are a Bain Capital Company. How important is an active, aware investor to push the ESG agenda as far as the boardroom is concerned?
Yeah, absolutely. Am I audible? Yes. For you, of course. Okay. I think first of all, I should thank Vomik and CSR Box because I have been advocating that sustainability and ESG is the key, not the CSR only. And I think it took them 9 years to bring the ESG forum first time, but nevertheless, it's not late. So thank you for doing that.
I have been CSR and sustainability for last 7 years. Before that, I was in marketing for a decade. What I have seen transpiring in boardrooms, of course, we can't disclose what happens in the boardroom, but I can talk about the leadership traits, what happens in the boardroom. CSR was something which I was like pushing, and ESG is like they are pushing me, right? That's a clear change I see in my leadership, right? And being a Bain Capital funded company, they're the majority stakeholder. It's obvious that ESG is going to be the key. Let me also tell you that, what's happening in tech companies and why ESG is important. So we become a carbon neutral company in 2020, way before pandemic. And what we took a stride, it's in this 2017, going GRI and every bit of CDP and different kind of reporting frameworks. But what ESG really helped us is that the biggest push was not investors. For us, the biggest push was customers. Most of our customers across the globe, I have like calls every now and then with the different procurement teams of our customers, asking us data, validation, assurance, quite a detail. I mean, I have a conversation like, why don't you buy sustainable aviation fuel? I said, okay, who is going to fund it? Am I going to fund it, or you as a customer going to fund for your requirements, right? So there's a lot of detailed conversations happening, and there will be a carbon price. There would be a carbon, already most of our customers we are discussing, there's going to be a carbon price for every single contract moving forward, right? So if I am servicing to my customer and they expect me to be this much of carbon emissions, reductions, I think they are not pay for it, right? Because what's Pratyush the point will bring, I cannot go to ask my board or my leadership that, hey, keep spending on it, right? So that's a change you will see. The other side is, which is again, customer is a part of supply chain. So supply chain will be the most driving factor in my mind for ESG. And that's we all know what is a problem we face with the supply chain. I think the whole world is talking about supply chain crisis. Pratyush also talked about, and I think I heard the other colleagues, greenwash, right? I think nowadays you can't do that, actually. If you try more to do that, and I know there is a lot of scrutiny at a lot of levels, right? I know some of you have talked about, I think I heard a question about CDP. And some of you must be doing it, right? You see the amount of scrutiny CDP is doing vis-a-vis few years back, or any reporting format for matter, right? Is phenomenal, right? If I miss one data, I see red on my compliance. Right? It's no longer that you can just fill some numbers and, So I think that's where the world is, right? And the other side is the ESG investment, right? So we have two sides of the coin, not ESG and CSR, but I look at ESG internal and ESG external. The ESG external for me is the ESG investment. I can't disclose a lot of things because there's a lot of internal things for a company, but I can tell you, if there is a company looking for investment or going public at this point of time globally, ESG play a phenomenal role. Phenomenal. I can't even express you how much time, effort of those ESG leaders goes into it. So I think the world is really looking at ESG as a one singular, framework at this point of time. The good part is that there were so many frameworks, but finally, the boardroom started accepting ESG vis-a-vis the other frameworks what we had. And that gives a lot of impetus for people like us to drive this internally.
Thanks, Abhishek. I think he set it up so nicely that I come to the smartest one soon. So just for context, carbon, it used to be called as the Carbon Disclosure Project. Now it's called CDP. CDP is an assessment mechanism for two key pillars that's happening in the global regulatory environment. One is what is called the Task Force for Climate-Related Financial Disclosure. They're going to use CDP to go ahead and do that. The second is what is called as the Task Force for Nature-Related Financial Disclosures. So there are two of them, and that's where I segue directly into Prerana So Prerana is someone who's sort of occupied different roles, both on the corporate side, etc., and now she's on part of the Aga Khan habitat. So what does an ESG really look like for an Aga Khan foundation overall, considering that you work very closely with nature-based solutions? So over to you.
Can you hear me? Is there a... Yeah, great. Okay. So thank you, first of all, for the pressure of being the smartest one. And delighted to be here, see people from ICICI, my former colleagues, and so many partners and friends. So it's just lovely to be, in person after so long. So from an Aga Khan perspective, the way we look at it is we look at being the catalyst for this. Besides, we have our own commitments of net zero. So globally, we'll be net zero by 2025. And as a result of that, I'm traveling by public transport because there is so much about, measurement, etc., until I figure out about electric car. So we believe we have a role to play because we look at it from a community perspective, because everybody cares about the earth, but we are not so mindful in terms of what we believe is a good action. If we are working in water or we are working in different areas, we are working in a school, the focus is so much more on the soft part, the curriculum. But you're not looking at, the building and the emissions. We are not looking at energy audits. We are not looking at... So we work like in a systems approach. It's all about having a systems approach.
Sure.
Am I clear? Is it resounding? Otherwise, I can go there. Perfectly fine? Okay, fine. Yeah. So we believe that it's important to look at it from a community lens. So what we do is we actually, wherever we work, we create on the village level like a biodiversity committee to map what is the flora, fauna, the animals there. Also from a disaster risk resilience. A lot of people do integrated village development, but from a disaster risk resilience mapping, GIS mapping, to find out, thanks to the climate, and we are all experiencing it, right from floods to earthquakes, which are the areas, what are the safe houses? Are the safe houses well prepared? So we are working from a community lens. And so it would be good, it's great that, to bring it to the fore that net zero is not only for corporates, but it's for us non-profits also. And it's for corporates when they're looking at the CSR also. Because there's a tendency, and I worked with Yes Bank Foundation, and of course, since I was the head of the foundation, we took care of it. But there's a tendency to look at net zero separate and CSR separate. So I think it's important to have that perspective, and at Yes Bank, we used it to our advantage. So what we did is we believe that we have a role to play, to direct finance, where finance goes. So we had ESG guidelines as part of our lending. Of course, we got lots of complaints from our team because they were like, what is this? You're giving us a disadvantage. But what worked for us is, thanks to that, we got IFC funding, lines of funding at lower interest rates. And so much more that we could do with innovative finance to direct it to good projects in the economy. Yeah, I'll stop there because I can continue.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thanks, Prerana, for this. And I think it sort of segues into some of the other questions that I wanted to bring to the panelists. And this round, if you can sort of keep it to around a minute in terms of your answers, I think it will be very efficient. So I'll start with Navdeep. Navdeep, you spoke a lot about water and how you use reusing water, etc. But I want to pick up from what Prerana said, and that's something that I would like the panel to sort of consider. How does the ESG conversation look in terms of S&G? So we've understood the E part very well, but how do you sort of bring in S&G? So some of the community-based approaches, disaster resilience, nature-based solutions. So maybe we'll start with you, Navdeep.
So I think it's only the over decibel voice on the E part, which is overspoken, over written, over talked about, but I think the boardroom is not kind of differentiating between S and G also, and especially the G part. Let me bring G first. So I think for the listed companies specifically and for multinational companies on top of it, the G is very, very critical. And again, another good thing which we started this year is that we have upgraded our CSR committee to CSR and ESG committee from the April onwards. And this CSR and ESG committee, obviously the scope is expanded, all the governance mechanisms have been put in place, and Pratyush, no greenwashing, absolutely accountability. We have, and if you go to our website, we have a Society 2030 10 years strategy in place, where we have defined 25 ESG metric, 25 non-financial indicators are announced, they are called out, there are ambitions in place, there are milestones in place, there are KPIs in place. And happy to tell, 6 out of those 25 KPIs are linked to our CEO's long-term incentive, our CEO's bonus. So it's not just the financial achievement by our CEO, 6 very critical, and all the net zeros are 3 out of those 6. So please go to our website, see those 25 non-financial indicators. To add to that, so we have a board level ESG CSR committee. We have a monthly review by our management committee, we call them XCOM, which reviews the risks and challenges on our 25 indicators. Then below that, we have a ESG embedding team called cross-functional team.
Correct.
So that's happening. We also celebrate ESG champions in our monthly or quarterly town halls. There are awards given to that. I am the winner recently, last Friday, for having won award on ESG, and my team, Mansi and Shobika, is there. So that's on the governance part. The S part, social part, basically one of our must-dos as Society 2030 is championing inclusion and diversity, and not by just mere announcing it. I mean, that's at play. We have called out that 50% of our boardroom will be gender, women representation. We are already marching very, very much on that. Many of our new hires are women, and you can see that on LinkedIn, all the announcement that keeps happening on that. So people with disability, LGBTQI, we celebrate, etc. That's all inside what we do. But outside, when we do our CSR programs, there is a cutoff that 50% of our beneficiary of all our CSR program must be women. In India, we are crossing sometimes 55, sometimes 60, and we also run sometimes 100% of such programs. So a lot happening on S also, and boardroom is not looking at only E because that's fancy to tell. I think there is an equal focus on S and equal focus on G. In fact, G is becoming very heavy these days. So that's my take on that.
Thanks, Navdeep. I think you have a lot of detailed examples, and I think it will be useful for all of you to connect to Navdeep post the session. I think he's got some very good examples and very detailed examples. I'll sort of create some excitement, mix and match. I'll go directly to Pratyush. So how does S&G look as far as the board conversation is concerned?
So, let me start with G part. For everybody, audience, when Navdeep was saying CSR in ESG committee, this is going on across globe now, especially in India. A lot of company has gone march ahead. But for everybody, how the governance goes up. If the board committee just check whether headed by the MD CEO or independent director. If it is independent directors, higher mark. Within independent directors, if it is a woman, further higher mark. Within them, if it is somebody is from transgender, LGBTQ or person with disability, further higher mark. This is how the governance goes. Must to watch when you go through different websites. Second, when targets come on ESG part, this should go at, like Navdeep says, these 22 CEOs, I believe for every company, this should go as cross-cutting across all department. The ESG facilitator is not expert of all, not master of everything. He can facilitate and catalyze, but the KPI should go to all departmental heads to certain KPI. Even if somebody is logistic head, that's certain KPI. But the ESG with respect to procurement, supply chain, a part should go, say 5 percentile of his KPI should go. That line has to be there, and boards are discussing on those lines and giving those targets. Second, these ESG targets are being openly disclosed, like Navdeep said, this is disclosed. Kindly go and check which are the other corporates are doing that.
Correct.
If not, if you are buying their salary, if you are working there, ask why it is not there. Again, boiling down to citizen, our own voices and all. Second one on S part, lot of small things happen. I'll tell you, if you have a typical NGO head or a foundation head or CSR head, look, in India, for the livelihood of a woman, they will do small example, dona patal making, plucking lips and doing dona patal making. Might be socially correct, but on ESG not. Because to have somebody's livelihood, I'm damaging a tree. Can this same thing be done with, say, waste paper patal making? So we are giving a solution to the waste paper, being on ESG front, on the forefront, yet not damaging and giving livelihood. So these kind of lanes, anything we do must have two lanes on environment and social before you say yes on ESG part.
Thanks, Pratyush. Am I audible? If it's not, it's fine. Abhishek, over to you. And sorry, I think I'll have to put you under pressure because we are under time pressure. But please go ahead.
We are always under pressure, so
Yeah.
that's okay. I was surprised. I think the conversation about governance is too narrow here. ESG doesn't talk about governance, how you run your CSR department or function. Governance is about your company,
Yeah.
right? If you look at any ESG framework across the world. So I think the role of an ESG leader is no longer restricted to manage CSR, sustainability program. It's about being the advocate, a champion, work with the legal team, work with your finance team, work with your marketing on product, work with the supply chain, right? So you are championing these things. You're not owning it, but you are championing across. It's a huge framework. Employee health and safety, learning and development, it comes under ESG.
Correct.
So the framework of governance, I was surprised only we're talking about CSR and committee and compliance, right? It's huge, right? So please, I would really suggest that you look at ESG in a very broad perspective. Go to some of the frameworks which is publicly available. If not, I think you will make something publicly available.
Absolutely.
So I think this has to go 10x what we are actually, probably we are thinking and talking about it.
So thanks for that, Abhishek. I think you've sort of articulated a big ticket vision. Me being the moderator, I take the baton from you and give it to Ashwini.
Thank you, Abhishek, because you opened up the piece of governance in a big way. I think very quickly, I don't see much of a difference between all the jargon that we use, ESG and triple bottom line and CSR and CSP and whatever. To me, it's all the same. So I think that one thing needs to be very well understood, because the moment you start dissecting it into different kinds of silos, I think the problem begins. Two, there is very little difference between or I would say very little amount of separability between E, S and G.
Correct.
And G also as not just a corporate governance of a company, but
Correct.
Governance in a manner that I think, Navdeep, let's remember our UNIDO days, where we talk about governance as norms, networks, and trust.
Correct.
So CSR is not about doing a farmers program or doing a health program. It's about building a trust-based relationship with the
Correct.
communities.
Correct.
And that trust would not be on a hollow footing. It would be demonstrated on the basis of how you engage with them.
Correct.
What do you do with the environment around them?
Correct.
How do you make responsible products or offer responsible services? So therefore, the whole framework is, we may try to look at it in different lenses, but at
Correct.
the end of the day, it's all one. So therefore, whether you talk about social sustainability or whether you're talking about environmental sustainability, it's,
Right.
which audience needs to listen what.
Sure.
But at the board level, I can assure you, all these things are looked at in a very comprehensive manner.
Sure.
And I think this comprehensiveness is something which we need to, keep on sustaining
Correct.
and attaining in our work.
Prerana, over to you. I'll flip the question because in your case, I think S and G is fairly sorted out.
Yeah.
Right? How would you look at E from an Aga Khan perspective?
So we live E, And a big focus is on nature-based solutions because, 40% of global GHGs comes from buildings. So how do we bring in, right from mangroves to AI and IoT to protect the coast? And with man-animal conflict, I love animals. How do we, have those solar fences? How do you have those well covers? That is very important. So for us, big focus on scope 3 and using friendly material.
Sure.
That's the focus. Yeah.
Perfect, perfect. So last words, what I'll do is that, 10 seconds each. Navdeep, we start from you. One thing that you would like to see changed. Just one thing. Off the top of your head. One thing only, Navdeep. Huh?
Yes,
Yeah.
it is the one thing which I have seen changed in myself and my organization, and I call out that one thing. That's called mindset.
Perfect, perfect. Ashwini.
Comprehensiveness.
Comprehensiveness. Prerana.
Mindset and can do by everyone.
So I'll pick can do. Huh?
Yeah, can.
SB net zero target of India to be preponed from 2070 to 2050.
Okay. Abhishek.
For me, it's a culture, not the compliance.
Okay, culture. So fantastic. So culture, mindset, comprehensiveness, can-do spirit, and targets being advanced. So fantastic. I think we end on an excellent note. Thank you for being a patient audience. Sorry, the time's up. Questions offline we can take. Thank you so much.